no good. Rebounded by Anthony. 2 seconds left. Anthony for the win. Cody rolls it. Cole Anthony gives the Magic a victory.
Close-up Magic.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Close-Up Magic. I'm your host, Stephen Cameron, and today we got Malik Grady with us. What's going on, Malik? How you doing, man? It's been a week or so.
I'm doing good, man. I'm refreshed. Glad to be back with the Close-Up Magic. We've had some good fortune since I was gone, so definitely good tidings to be coming back to leading up to the holidays. So I like it.
I know last time you and I were talking was with Dante a few weeks ago, but we were in the middle of that losing streak. And now we have 3 games that we won, which is really, really exciting. Before we jump into that, man, you have been doing some really cool stuff covering UF. You're going to so many games. You are like a regular reporter. You and the coach and the front office are like on a first name basis these days. I don't think you've actually spoke to our listeners about what you're actually doing. Do you want to give a little bit more detail on that whole platform that you're working with and just what you're doing? I think it's really cool and exciting.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully I don't have too much of a lag, some sort of video thing going on for me and all. But I longtime guest with the Close-Up Magic, Eric Fawcett, is a good friend of mine from online for a number of years. And he and a friend of his, they do a podcast called the Florida Basketball Hour, which covers UF basketball down to the nail, every single day, year round, recruiting, all that kind of stuff. And I've gotten to be good friends with them. We have similar mindsets when it comes to analytically looking at basketball, that kind of thing. And I'm in Gainesville, where the Gators are at. One co-host is in Alberta, Canada. One is in Charlotte, North Carolina. So they don't get to come to games very often. And I said, hey, why not have me come and cover some games while you guys are out of town? We can kind of expand this a little bit and have some fun. And it's worked out pretty well. It's been an adjustment, learning how to be an actual media member and kind of straddle that line of being fan and media member while not offending the actual scribes who depend on getting quotes and players for their bread and butter and for money, that kind of thing, and not making a toxic environment for the players. So it's a real kind of you're tiptoeing a little bit. And I have a lot more respect, even more than I did already, for what the pro beat writers and the daily beat writers already have to go through and what they have to balance, knowing that you're going to be there day in and day out and trying to balance that with your daily life and what the coaches are going through, that kind of stuff. So it's been pretty exciting. It just gives you a really, like I said, it gives you perspective on what guys like, our guest today, Philip Rossman-Reich, go through when they're covering the team every single day. And that kind of grind, the good and bad of it, where you get close to guys, where you have a lot of responsibility, but you also have responsibility to your listeners and to yourself to try to get information, but you don't want to burn people. You don't want to make people not want to, answer your questions. You don't want Mosley looking at you side eye, for example, or the players being like, oh my God, this guy's questioned again. He's going to try to get me in trouble. He's going to try to put me in a trap. So it's interesting just seeing those different sides of things. I know for some people that get inside baseball and how things are done kind of lessens the enjoyment of it. But for me and for guys like you, I think we were a really good time seeing how the sausage is made, so to speak. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, it sounds like you're experiencing like, when we've done it with the Close-Up Magic, or at least you and I, it's been, we've only done it a couple of times, so our approach mentally is different. But when you, like right now, you've transitioned from going to 1 or 2 games as media a season to you're covering basically every home game. So your approach is different. The types of questions you want to ask is different because it's not just like, hey, these are the only 2 questions I might ask all year. Like I can build something here. I can get into dirty details that I wouldn't ask if this was a 1 or 2 time appearance. I can do that. So it sounds like you're learning and balancing that approach and how you want to take it. That's really cool. I feel like this is just like a really cool experience for you who went to journalism school, who has a love for UF basketball, has a love for draft and upcoming prospects, and that some of these guys that you are watching and talking to will eventually make it in the league. That's just got to be a really fun experience. Sorry, you might have said at the beginning, where can people find your work in this podcast and the stuff you're doing?
Well, the podcast is Florida Basketball Hour. I come on there, kind of periodically, intermittently with them. I have access to the account myself, so sometimes I'll write in my own voice, kind of covering the Gators, talking about different things, pointing out things that I think are interesting, that kind of stuff. So it's just a good way to get into things on Florida Basketball Hour, the podcast, the Twitter website, that kind of stuff, things that we do. So, and what you were saying, speaking about, some of the players that you're going to see in the NBA, in the last couple of years, I've been able to see Anthony Edwards kind of up and close, for example, a couple of years ago. Got to see him in Gainesville and see what he was like. And saw Patrick Baldwin, who's with the Golden State Warriors now. See Walker Kessler, who's with the Utah Jazz right now. And see how these guys look, because you kind of get an idea as how big these guys are and how they interact with each other. But to really see them really get the job done is pretty special. So it's just interesting seeing that perspective and all,
It's pretty cool, man. I'm really excited for you. You and I were talking a few weeks ago, and I was just like, this was off seasons, and I was just like, man, like, you got to take advantage of this, because who knows how long this is going to last. And like, just to be able to do it at the rate and consistency that you are is just really exciting and fun. The biggest downside to me running this podcast is I live in California, and I can't go be a part of the Magic anymore when I used to live in Longwood and could go to games regularly. So it's a little bit different in ways I'm envious. So anyways, let's bring up our guest, Philip Rossman-Reich of Orlando Magic Daily and Locked On Magic. He is someone who does go to games regularly and cover this team on a regular basis. Philip, good afternoon, good evening, good night. How are you, sir? How's it going, man?
3-game win streak. Life is good, right? Like let's bottle this energy up for a little bit. It's everyone's happier when you're winning.
Yeah, the Magic are on a very nice 3-game win streak. We our record is 8-20, still, not amazing, but winning twice against the Toronto Raptors and once against the Clippers in an awesome overtime win has just been really, really fun. Philip, you and I were talking, and Malik, the three of us were talking like right before we went live about when we first talked a week ago to bring you on the show. I was like, man, this could be a really depressing show, talking about a bunch of losses, maybe one win sprinkled in there, but now it's a completely different tune. As someone who covers this team on a weekly basis, you write, 3, 5, 7 articles a week yourself covering this team, plus your podcasts, plus, at the frequency that you can go to games when you're able to, and it allows with your other job. What has been your biggest, for you as a reporter, your mind shift, your tone, your personality change, from just a week ago to today, just in general?
I think the biggest thing is the results. At the end of the day, everyone's happier when you win. Everyone is questioning and searching and trying to figure out when you lose. I think one thing that, I know I've gotten some friction and pushback from Magic fans, and this is kind of like what you guys were talking about earlier, is with regards to Jamal Mosley. And there's been a lot of questions about him, and talking to him, you kind of hear and see that he's very much thinking about the big picture all the time. He's thinking about what this team is trying to be, not necessarily what they are now. And so, I know I've gotten into some friction with some fans who want results now. And they'll say, well, why is Mosley doing this? Why are the Magic doing this? And I'll be like, look, they're I'll often tell people straight up, this season is not about this season. I'm sorry, guys. It'd be nice if this team, it's certainly a play-in tournament, a play-in run would be really, really nice, but they're trying to build something for well into the future, whether that's next year, whether that's 2 years from now. And I think that's where they've always had their focus. And so, when I look at someone like Mosley, he's had a very kind of even-minded temperament. He's been very encouraging. He's been trying to say, hey, we got to do these things. And certainly you got to hold him to account on some of the things that he said in the offseason and that we weren't seeing. But now we're starting to see some of it click. The team's been healthier. Getting Mo Bamba back was a big boost to this team. Getting Mo Wagner back was a big boost to this team. Obviously, Markel Fultz, Cole Anthony. This is the healthiest this team has been. And as even Mo Bamba said after Sunday's game, we still got guys in reserve that are going to really help this team win. And so, just getting some of those pieces back together, we're starting to kind of see what this team really envisioned it can be. Not just in the play style that they wanted to play, which maybe didn't fit the personnel that they had, but now in the personnel too. And so I think we're seeing a team that really does believe in what the coaching staff is preaching, what the coaching staff is teaching, and is now starting to put those pieces together. There's been a lot of faith without results for a long time. Now we're starting to see those results and starting to really kind of get into the nitty gritty work of what this season's supposed to be.
Well, it's wild to me because like watching Mosley, he has to have seen other coaches in his place, taking a young team, a team that's in some ways built to lose and is supposed to be about development. But you're trying to shepherd them towards when they're going to have respectability and contention. Now, most of those coaches on that path usually don't make it to the destination. They're usually kicked off the side. They're usually some sort of mutiny. So to know that there needs to be some sort of transition at some point and that being a good soldier is not going to be enough, that's a really weird place to be because like I said, even guys like Kenny Atkinson who did everything right, building guys up, building a culture, developing guys. He was not there for the promised land. He did not get to the milk and honey, so to speak. That was another guy who got that job. So for Mosley, he has to know that. And yet he's been such a good soldier in terms of carrying the water for the injuries, carrying the water for the development, carrying the water for, suddenly guys that haven't been part of the future, whether it be RJ Hampton, although I think that's a little bit to do with him as well. I think he maybe is in lockstep with the front office and thinking that he's not part of the team's future. But what are things that you would do differently if you were in that head job? Be like, hey, listen, at some point, I need to start looking at what my future is going to be and how to stay on top of this. When we start winning, and because he's saying things like he doesn't want to throw too much at the team, for example, keep things simple. But there are certain things where you're like, man, creatively, if you could kind of hone down to make sure Franz gets the ball in the fourth quarter, make sure you do some things to free Markel Fultz up earlier in the game and all. So what are some things that you would do differently or things that you have kind of sympathy for Mosley so far, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's being dealt a really bad hand. I mean, it's not even just a bad hand that you'd expect from a team that's so young and rebuilding. Like it's a young team and he understands that. It's a bad hand that there's a lot of injuries and he's having to mix and match things. And I give Mosley both credit and blame for this. I often feel like when I was watching the Magic play, especially through that injured time, is they were playing as the team they want to be rather than the team that they are. And I don't think you can do any of that without the full support of the front office. I think Mosley's been able to kind of coach the way he wants to coach because the front office really believes in him. And barring, like you said, a pure mutiny, this front office really believes Mosley is the guy for this moment. And kind of some of the examples that you made, whether it was Kenny Atkinson, Brett Brown from the Sixers really comes to mind too. He was lockstep with the franchise, and then the front office changed, and all of a sudden everything else changed. With Atkinson, it was star players that he didn't get along with for whatever reason. Mosley, first off, if you've ever interacted with him personally, like the dude is just genuinely like cares about you. Like I've heard stories from Magic staffers where he spends the time to memorize everybody's name, like just beyond everything else. Like, my first interaction with him, I asked him a question, about his first day of practice. He kind of gave a deflecting answer. He pulled me aside the next day and said, hey, I didn't mean to kind of brush off your question. I'm just so focused on the guys. I'm not really focused about myself. And, like stuff like that, I think goes a long way. And I imagine that's how he, if that's how he is with media, imagine what he's like with the players that he's working with every single day. So I think there's a lot of trust built in with the players that, hey, this guy's going to help me get better. and eventually help us get better as a team. And again, it's just all about getting that bigger vision. For me, when I was watching Mosley, some of it to me was like, yes, that's all well and good, but you need the results too. Like it's really hard to keep young players interested, engaged, and focused on a great beyond that's way off in the distance. Like you need some results in the meantime. And I felt like at times, the Magic have experiments they want to run, and that's fine. But at times I felt like Orlando needed to make things simpler. Like they say, oh, we're trying to keep things simple for these guys. They probably at times needed to make things even simpler. I like the ideas within this offense, especially the offense. I think is a great place to really focus on it. But there's a lot of ideas that I really, really like within this offense, but it's almost too loose. Like there's almost too much read and react, not enough like, hey, here's some guardrails to kind of get you through. And to your point, getting Franz Wagner the ball more, like having a set design specifically to get him the ball in a spot that he can like it in. That's not really kind of the offensive philosophy that he's shown. Is he wants reads. He wants to have kind of multiple branches off of each action that you can go to, and that, you make the right read, you'll get to the spot. That's a really advanced offense to run for a team that A, doesn't have a lot of shooting for spacing purposes, and B, has a lot of young guys that don't maybe know the timing that's necessary to run an offense like that. Like the Golden State Warriors work because they have Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and a fantastic passer in Draymond Green, and everyone just kind of is able to improvise. This is not a team that's going to be able to improvise a lot. They need a little bit more structure. So if I were to change anything, I'd put up a few more guardrails and kind of guide the team where you want them to go and into the thoughts you want them to go, and to just, again, make things simple. Like defensively, the amount of switching they were doing, like I think a lot of that was just to cover for some of the shortcomings that they had on their roster, to be honest. And they just weren't on the same page with it. And so I would have said, tried to make it much more simpler than that. And because switching sounds easy, sounds simple, but it's actually really complicated. It's actually a high level defensive technique to throw at teams. I would have done more things to make things simple early in the season, but I think we're seeing some of that pay off now. It's like, okay, now they've seen enough of this. They got the right personnel in. Everyone's kind of been in this situation before. They know what doesn't work. Now they're learning what does work, and they're playing at a much higher level. So, again, maybe the ground was watered, and now we're starting to see the seeds sprout.
For me with Mosley, I think he's a totally fine developmental coach. He does a lot of things very well that we don't see on the court, like during practices. I mean, there were a couple of moments like during that losing streak where you could see guys' frustrations being built up a little bit, but for the most part, like guys seemed okay, like pretty locked in. It takes a very strong culture and a cultural leader like Mosley to be able to be in a 9-game losing streak and keep guys locked in and engaged. With all the ups and downs with injuries, they've had guys in and out of the lineups. For the most part, the team's been very locked in, very engaged. Developmentally wise, he's fantastic. Game management wise, like you were mentioning, there's some questions there. I still have some of those questions. Example, and I'm just going to bring up Mo Bamba because he's someone I actually want to talk in a larger aspect in general, but this is just a good example in the beginning. He kind of had like a up and down role with his minutes, and even when he was being substituted in and out of games. And it's like, man, as soon as Bamba had a larger role that was more consistent, when unfortunately it was due to injuries, but as soon as that happened, Mo Bamba started playing better. And it's like, he just needed a little bit more solidification in his role and how he was being used to get the best out of him, even though he was in that backup role that was a little inconsistent. And I mean, Bamba was trash in the beginning of the season. I hate to say that word, and maybe trash is the wrong, but he was not good. And now he's like turned into the last 10, 12 games has been really solid for us for the most part. Pick a couple outliers here and there, like that first Philadelphia game. He outside
of the back spasms. Like I think those back spasms were hurting him a lot more than he let on.
I think so too. And role players are going to have bad games, most role players aren't going to play 5 to 8 games good every single game. They're going to have like that's what the all-star players are supposed to do. They're supposed to be the ones consistent 8-10 games in a row and then have a bad game one out of every 10 to 12 games. Role players are going to have a little bit more inconsistency with their ups and downs during that time. And then you get down the line bench players that are like third stringers playing at a higher role. They're going to have even more ups and downs in their plays for the most part. And like, I mean, that's just like more like kind of how I view things, but it's just been, I mean, I think that's an example of where I agree with you, where I think like not like guardrails would have been a little bit nicer for some of these guys to get going a little bit more. But Mo Bamba, man, he's been pretty impressive coming back from injury these last couple of games. Even before the injury, up before those like last 3 or 4 games, he was playing really well as well. What do you think? I was just bringing up the consistency in his role. What do you think are some other aspects that have really kind of like unlocked Mo recently?
The consistency in his role, I think is a big thing. Like just knowing, this was a thing that Steve Clifford was big on, probably to a fault, but knowing when you're going to play, who you're going to play with, I think that's a solid base for him to go. Like he knows what his job is when he gets on the floor. But, I think honestly, like what we've seen from Mo Bamba is something that we've seen throughout the roster. And, the Paolo Banchero is probably the one guy I would single out as also kind of in this front. I think there's just been a much more attention to detail and focus on the defensive end. We ran a lot of the stats, especially after Carter went out, that the Magic's defensive rebound rate when Carter was on the floor, I think is like 77, 78, 79%, somewhere in there. With Bamba on the floor, so not necessarily with Carter also on the floor, but essentially with Carter off the floor, the Magic's defensive rebound rate dropped to like 66%. And that's not to say that's all on Bamba, but that's a pretty significant drop going from, grabbing almost 4 out of every 5 or 3 out of every 4 defensive rebounds to grabbing 2 out of every 3. That's a pretty significant drop. And we were seeing the Magic really struggle, especially early on in that losing streak, struggle with offensive rebounds, struggle giving up second chance points. And it was just impossible to win. And that was something the Magic were really good at early in the season, was something that, their defense was struggling, but that was kind of keeping them afloat and giving them a real shot to win games. The last certainly Sunday night against Toronto, especially, I think Bamba had 9 rebounds in that game, but certainly the last 2 or 3 games, I think Bamba has especially been much more attentive to the defensive glass, securing rebounds, making sure the Magic finish those possessions with the rebound, get kind of cement that stop. And I think that attention to detail, that focus has been roster wide. I would single out Paolo Banchero, especially on that front. You just watch the energy that he's bringing to the defensive end now, especially on the glass. It's night and day from where it was before his injury, and even like some of the first games after he came back from his injury. There's just kind of been this sense of like, we got to have some pride on the defensive end. We may not be perfect. We may not make all the reads. We may not make all the rotations perfect, but we got to be willing to scratch and claw. And, Mo Bamba especially, he's had the motor question kind of follow him around. And, I've always found that criticism to be a little weird, to be a little bit off, just because he's kind of like, it's kind of like when Tracy McGrady said, everyone said, Tracy McGrady looks like he's lazy because he has the kind of sleepy eye look. Mo Bamba's gait looks like he's hunched over. It doesn't look like he's playing hard, even if he is, but he definitely has taken his energy up another level to kind of make up for, whatever he's lacking there. So, I think that he's done a much better job on the glass. And I think the whole team has put a lot more attention on that specifically. And that's what's kind of spurred this little spurt from the Magic here these last 4 games.
Yeah. And one thing I was noticing is even in his like overall season, he's assisting more than he ever has. He have a better field goal percentage, better 2-point percentage, better 3-point percentage, better true shooting percentage. He's getting for the free throw line more. Is a little more focused offensively, and defensively, he's focusing much more on rebounds and doing that kind of dirty work, the things that you can do no matter who's on the court with you. I wonder if he's maybe kind of embracing the chaos a little bit, because you're not going to know who's going to be at your 4 or your point guard, but you do know that you have to rebound the ball. You have to find a way to just be focused offensively and not kind of those second shots, that kind of thing. So if you can do those things, doesn't matter if you're next to OKK, if you're next to Bol Bol, you're going to be an asset to the team in your 17 to 23 minutes. And I feel like he's kind of had that attitude, especially coming back from injury these last 3 games. And I'm not sure if it's going to continue. I'm not sure if Moritz Wagner is going to be able to continue with that, because both of them have had some injuries where they've kind of broken down. But together, they've been a real asset at the center position that you had lost when you lost WCJ. All of a sudden you had Schofield and Bobo at center. To go from that to Moritz Wagner and Mo Bamba, where they are right now, is a huge change center-wise. How do you kind of shift to looking to the future? What happens when WCJ comes back? What happens when OKK comes back? Like, do you spend much time speculating and wondering what's going to happen going forward? Like, because there's a couple of different ways to watch the Magic. One is as to what's happening right now, the players on the court, the players that are healthy. But there's also the temptation to always be like, when's Gary Harris coming back? J.I. is in Lakeland. OKK is running around. All these different guys happening. So it's very easy to think about what could be, what will be, and what shall be, even to the next year, because you're looking at 2 lottery picks and that kind of thing. So how often do you focus on the present versus the future? And do you kind of try to have the bifocals on where you're looking at both of them? Or how does that work for you, I guess?
I mean, you have to at least have some thought about that. Like, you have to have like before the season started, just knowing Jonathan Isaac's going to come back at some point. I kind of hypothesized that Bol is playing Jonathan Isaac's minutes. He kind of simulates what Isaac's going to be when he's on the floor a little bit. And then Bol was so good. It's just like, well, now you have to play him. Like, you can't not play Bol. And like, I've probably been as critical as anyone can be of Bol and how good and how well he's played. But even I would say, like, look, it doesn't matter. You figure out a way to get him on the floor. Look, this is a good problem to have if you have players that you really like, that you need to play, that you want to play, that you can depend on playing. Like, this is part of the depth we thought the Magic would have, and certainly it's not like consistent because they're all super, super young. But it's probably going to come down to the Magic are going to have a plan. That's really what it comes down to. I mean, this season isn't necessarily about winning. We've seen Mosley be willing to play 10, 11 guys in the first half and narrow his rotation in the second half. So they're going to make the room for as many guys as they feel like they need to make the room for. I don't know what the answer is. With the Magic and their history of injuries, I kind of am like, I'm not really going to think about it till they're apparently close, until they're like dressed for the next game almost, because it always, like with the Magic and how slow they sometimes bring guys back, it always feels like it's remote. And like people are pointing out, we're at that point where we're expecting Wendell Carter back. It should be fairly soon, if not this week, next week, maybe the week, if things are really bad, the week after. But at the same time, the Magic are playing well enough right now that maybe you can afford to wait a little bit longer. Maybe you can give them that little extra track. You don't need to rush him back as much, because Mo Wagner and Mo Bamba are playing so well. But this team's better with Wendell Carter in it, and they need to see Wendell Carter out there as much as they need to see any of these other guys out there. So, it's this is the part I don't envy Jamal Mosley, because it is his job to balance both the short term and the long term. To think about, okay, this is what we need to see, this is what we need to build, this is who we want to become. At the same time, we need to actually win and compete in some of these games. We need to focus in on our next opponent. We can't be thinking all the time about these big picture issues. We can run some experiments, try some things out, see if there's a certain matchup we like, go for it. But at the same time, we've got to focus on these games at hand too. And so it's not an easy balance. I think Mosley would tell you it's not an easy balance to focus on the long term and the short term at the same time. But that's kind of what you sign up for when you're rebuilding, is to have both in hand and try and figure it all out.
I want to circle back there for a moment, but I also want to take a time to pause and just remind listeners that, and this is mostly for the podcast listeners, because I have to plug in some ads here to hit some numbers, but also remind the listeners to please like and subscribe to this channel if you're watching on YouTube, or or listening to it on a podcast platform. If you have a few moments, give us a Christmas gift of leaving us a review or a subscription. That'd be great. And if you are at all interested in financially supporting the show in a bigger way, please check out our Patreon program. A couple different tiers in there. I'm not going to get into the details there, but please check out the links in the show descriptions to check out merchandise, Patreon, different places where you can find and view the show and subscribe there and leave a review. All that is really good. And ad. Cool. Thanks, Philip. Appreciate you dealing with us, plugging that in right there.
I know the game.
You do, and you have to do it a couple of times more than I do. I only have to do it once in the middle. You have to break yours up into like 2 or 3 segments, which is, hey, it's part of the show. It's back to coaching, right? And we're talking about coach and playing this balance of looking for the future and looking towards, like the current and development. And like, I don't know, man. I kind of look at this team in like a couple different tiers, right? You have your for sures, Paulo, Franz. You have your probably for sures, and like Fultz, Wendell Carter, Suggs, maybe. And then you have everyone else where I'm like, how much more data do we really need?
Ball and Cole. Yeah.
Like Ball, Cole, Chuma, Bamba, even to an extent, like some of these guys' contracts, like they're just going to work them, like Bull, Ross, Harris, RJ. We don't need more information on them. I like coach doesn't have to experiment with those guys. They need to be utilized best going to support this team, right? If winning games this year at some point is important, like Chuma, Chumo, Kiki, who else would I put in this sub tier? Maybe Cole Anthony, even to an extent. Like, we kind of know what sort of players they are. We kind of know how those types of players, like, I guess I'm saying we've already found 2 of our pillars and we kind of already like know who the other couple are. When you really get down to players like 7, 8, 9 in the rotation, like I don't necessarily view those as the same types as I would with the other players. Like, I'm not trying to collect as much data on bench guys because yes, they are important, but at the same point, they are so much easier to replace and find different types of players to fit what we actually need next to Cole or next to Franz, next to Paulo, next to Wendell Carter Jr. and Fultz, like, and Suggs. Like we kind of, I don't know, man. So I guess my thing is like, I've said a lot, and to bring it all home is to like, can there be too much experimentation trying to collect data with some of these role players that are not really a part of like the long-term future, to where we might potentially be hurting the development of the actual core where we're experimenting with their supporting players. So we're not giving them, instead of putting them in the most optimal lineup to bring out success. Now, part of that is injuries, right? But part of that is also the mindset that coach has. And so I'm just kind of wondering how you feel about that.
I think you're dancing around the big issue of the season so far. And look, like I will tell everyone who said, like, why are the Magic so injured? They need to look at the medical staff. I'm like, a lot of these injuries are random, folks. Like, who could have seen Cole Anthony tearing his oblique the way he tore his oblique, or Markelle Fultz breaking his toe right before camp, or Gary Harris tearing his meniscus? Like, yes, Gary's had some knee issues in the past. It's not so surprising, but like, these are random injuries. Like Wendell Carter straining his plantar fascia. Like, that's, you don't want that to be a tear. You don't want that to be surgery, because that's a long-term injury. That's a bad injury to have. So there's a lot of stuff that's been random about this season. But Steven, I think you're dancing around, I think, one of the big questions and one of the big issues that I had with the Magic this season is the front office kind of just rolled everything back from last year. Like a lot of the questions that we're having, like, yeah, Paolo's a new element to the mix, and seeing a healthy Markelle Fultz, once he kind of ramps himself back up to consistency, is a new element to the mix. But We saw a lot of this last year, and I think you're right. There is a fair criticism to levy to say, why did Jeff Weltman bring back the same roster? And sure, Orlando kept a lot of flexibility. They kept Gary Harris, who added some shooting. They drafted Caleb Houston to add some shooting. There's a lot of elements they're missing, and I do think that yes, this was a developmental year and not a year maybe to make a strong push. But I also think you could see, regardless of anything else, this team has playoff talent. It didn't take a genius to say okay, Paolo, Franz, Wendell, that should be enough to get you into the play-in mix if they're all healthy and they all play to standard. Now, they may not get there because Franz is a second-year player, Paolo's a first-year player, but I do agree with you that I don't think this team was set up for success or necessarily put in a position to be that surprise team that takes that big leap. I was someone that agreed that did not think that the Magic were ready to take on a player like a Donovan Mitchell that a lot of Magic fans got really excited about. And, I even know some people within the Jazz organization who are like, why didn't the Magic get involved in this? Some Jazz media members that were like, I thought the Magic would have been a great spot for them. And I'm more conservative on trade moves. I get people who are more aggressive, but I'll sit here today seeing 30 games of Paolo Banchero, and I'm like, yeah, if we would have gotten Donovan Mitchell, this is a playoff team. He makes them a playoff team by themselves, but Paolo Banchero is ready for that kind of pressure, for that kind of winning pressure. I agree with in the summer, and even to some extent now, I agree that the Magic probably weren't ready for that kind of extreme winning pressure because they have a coach who's never won before. They have a lot of players who've never won before. It's going to be a process to kind of deal with that pressure. And to Malik's point earlier, you bring in a Donovan Mitchell and all of a sudden you're not winning. Then the guy that's a good developmental coach all of a sudden doesn't fit anymore. So you made that investment. Not that a coach is an investment that is easy to dispose of, but to this point though, by running everything back, the Magic opened themselves up to the same problems they had last year: injuries, poor shooting, poor spacing. And a lot of that's kind of played out. And so, I think that what the Magic struggled to do, or the Magic didn't do this offseason, was put themselves in a position to surprise. Now, the injuries early in the season kind of killed that before we could even really get started. But then again, we're only 5.5 games out. Magic have come back from a bigger deficit with fewer games to go, and obviously they don't have to jump as far to get into the play-in tournament. So I don't want to put those dreams completely to bed quite yet. 3-game win streaks make everything seem very, very happy. But to that point, we're at a point now where, yes, we have seen a lot of these players before. We've seen how they interact with each other. We see how they fit into the system. We've added this Paolo Banchero piece. We kind of understand what the Magic need to have, or what the Magic need to surround them with. There's no running this back anymore. Yes, the vibes are good. Everyone loves each other. This is a great team. I think they like that camaraderie that they have. But you got to start making moves to win. You got to start making moves that will push this team to win. And I think the Magic didn't necessarily do that this offseason. Not that they had to be super aggressive about it, but they could have done some things to, I think, better set this team up for success. Now they've got to act. Now they're in a position. They have a player in Paolo. They have a player in Franz. The clock isn't ticking so loud that you need to be worried, but that clock has already started to tick. You need to start building a team to win, and to me, that's not a coaching issue. That's a front office issue. And so obviously.
Well, I think the one thing for me is that I don't think I've ever seen a team with a 5-some on the bench waiting to come back that's as interesting and as well-fitting as the 5 that are waiting right now. When you have Jalen Suggs, Gary Harris, Chuma Okeke, Jonathan Isaac, and Wendell Carter Jr., those are arguably, your 5 best defenders.
That's a starting lineup by themselves.
Yeah. You also have some of your better shooting when it comes. I mean, in terms of an overall, not just a knockout guy and all, but Gary Harris is a shooter. Jonathan Isaac had the wet jumper in the bubble. I'm still holding on to that.
It's the only thing he's been able to work on for the last 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, his knees still knocked together. Hey, when you're a lion posing as a giraffe, stuff happens, man. Your parts get together. You ever seen the Sphinx run around? His knees knocked together. Stuff happens, bro. But WCJ, taking threes, those kind of things. So to have those guys come in as just like, hey, guess what we're unveiling, and let's have work out with your current 10. I think there is some, something to be said for running it back when those are the guys you're going to be running out there. And I want to see it also just because I think just from a value proposition leading up to, to the February trade deadline, to get those guys on the court to see what you have. And then you can send guys to wherever. You can trade guys around. You can bench guys. You can have 10-day contracts or what have you and all. But this is the first time where I really like, man, I want to see these guys in the mix. What happens when Jalen Suggs pushes Cole Anthony, pushes Markelle Fultz? What happens when Gary Harris pushes Terrence Ross for playing time? What happens when Chuma Okeke is able to say, hey, Bo, let's move you to the 3, and I'm going to cover your back defensively so you can roam around a little bit and stuff. The excitement of being able to have that in real games, in games that matter, not just games where you're, the injured stepsister out there and all. So I don't know. It's like I said, it's hard for me to look at the present. I keep looking at the future because it feels like it's next week. Gary Harris seems like he should be back. WCJ, all those guys and all, but I kind of drive myself nuts with that stuff sometimes. For sure.
And I don't mean to kind of poo-poo that, because like when this roster's healthy, it's really interesting. And there's, you don't just look at the numbers. When Gary Harris is on the floor, the Magic are better. When Wendell Carter Jr. is on the floor, the Magic are better. We know what Jonathan Isaac can be. It's obviously going to be a kind of recovery year for him whenever he gets back. Jalen Suggs was taking some major steps forward this year. Like it took him a while, but he really seemed to have found his groove before the ankle injury flared up again. So, I'm not taking that away. There's a lot to believe in this roster, but to me, this is kind of the issue that I presented to people is like, usually a team might have one guy who's on a long-term injury. The Magic have like 2, maybe 3. And that puts you at a deficit immediately. And that's, I want to believe everyone's going to be healthy. I'm like you, Malik. I'm waiting for the day that everyone's healthy, that we could see this team as it was imagined on the floor. But the reality is, A, in the NBA, you're never 100% healthy. And B, that it's been 2 years of, 2 years already of being the most injured team in the league, working on number 3. At a certain point, you got to be like, we gotta move. Like a certain, not that guys are injury prone. It's just, we got to move. And again, I didn't expect them to be aggressive this past summer, but looking at how this season's developed, a lot of these injuries are random. I get that. There are a few long-term injuries that they should have planned for a little bit better. I think like Wendell Carter's a good example. Like Wendell Carter's never played 70 games in his career. I think if Wendell Carter is going to be a key player for your team, you got to plan on him being out 15 to 20 games every season. And maybe they did with Mo Wagner and Mo Bamba, and both happened to get hurt at the wrong time, but it's stuff like that you got to be thinking about as a front office.
Speaking of guys who have been hurt and recently come back, I want to bring up Cole Anthony. He is someone who I feel like has a little bit of controversy here and there, like mixed feelings, not controversy, but like Magic fans have a little bit of mixed feelings on him. But overall, I mean, he's come back, particularly the last couple of games. He's played really well. And it's been really exciting to see. He's shooting 37.8% from 3, 43 from the field, a little inconsistent there, 83 from three-point line. Just a couple more stats, 13.5 points per game. And this is off the bench as a 6-man. He started, I think, a couple games at the beginning of the season, but for the most part, he's been a 6-man, and kind of like his role has shifted a little bit. And it seems like he's really embraced that. What have you seen out of Cole Anthony recently, but just in general this season as he has transitioned to this 6-man role?
I mean, I think one thing that's happened that's kind of gone under the radar is like his ability as a point guard to bring the ball up is really, really important. But I think the Magic, because they can play Paolo at the point, they can play him alongside Markelle Fultz, they can play Franz as the lead ball handler. They move Cole off the ball a little bit more. And I think that's helped him set up his shot a lot better. He's not having to create as much. And it's not that Cole's a bad passer. He gets a little bit of tunnel vision. He's a little on the small side. He's a scorer's mentality. That kind of limited his ability to set up others. And we saw him throughout all of last season. he had to create his own shot all the time, and it wore him down. I think now those times when he's having to play that way are a lot more limited because the Magic have a lot, not that they have other point guards. Cole's still, I think, best bringing the ball up and kind of getting the team into its set, but he doesn't have to do the creation all the time. He can be a spot up shooter. He can kind of come off a curl a little bit and get a shot. He can, work against a rotating defense that he wasn't able to do last year as much. And he can do those pull up jumpers. And so he could be a little bit more effective on those pull-up jumpers when he gets those opportunities. He is finishing at the rim a lot better this year than he did last year too. Again, I think that's probably still the most inconsistent part of his game. But that ability to kind of have more ball handlers so he can move Cole off the ball, that's the part I think he's really embraced and really said, hey, I can get my points, I can get my scoring done this way a lot more effectively if I trust my teammates. And there's no bigger cheerleader on this team for his teammates than Cole Anthony. I think that was a big step for him, and one that I think a lot of people doubted he could make. If that seems to be something more permanent, if he is able to kind of find his shots without being on the ball, that makes him infinitely more valuable. Like you guys have said, that carves out a role for him in the future, and I think he understands that a lot better than I think a lot of people anticipated he would.
He was cheerleading so hard the other night, he actually almost hit his teammate with a chair. Sorry, Malik, pass it to you. I just wanted to bring that up because that was absolutely hilarious.
We all know Cole would be an excellent wrestler. I mean, a chair and Cole and a microphone. I mean, this guy's a star. Yes. You know what I'm saying? So I've been glad to be able to see Cole a little bit with Markelle Fultz, which I only played 15 minutes with him last year. Down the stretch of the game, I think last night, or the night before, he was floor with Fultz a little bit. You saw that kind of, hopefully that synergy being able to emerge, two offensive threats, two guys that can kind of be creative with the ball. So I'm just excited to see those combinations out there. And when Jalen Suggs comes back, that's even more so because we know RJ Hampton is not going to be in the mix. You know what I mean? Guys could die. You could have everybody out. They're not going to put RJ in. Can I RJ should probably be playing. He's done a lot of the things the Magic have asked him to do, and he's done them well. Kevon Harris has been pretty good. A lot of people knock Kevon, and I do think the Magic probably played him a little bit too much, especially early on. But Kevon's been a good ad, and that's a two-way guy. He's a 2-year two-way guy, so they have him next year too. He defends really well. He defends really hard. Like you saw, the Magic trusted him to guard Pascal Siakam on both games, Friday and Sunday. And he did. I mean, clearly overmatched size-wise, but he did well. Did well on him. Like he's a strong dude. I get the RJ thing, and I'm with everyone that RJ should get an opportunity. He has earned it. He has done everything this team has asked him to do, at least by our account.
He's looked good on the court when he did have an opportunity too.
Yeah, but Kevon, it's not like Kevon Harris hasn't earned it too. I want to just make that clear. Lift someone up here too.
Well, dude, Admiral, in these first couple games in December has actually become a guy who isn't somebody that we just cower and cover as who's on the court. This guy, we're like, oh my God, when are we going to cut him for fill in the blank G League cast?
They need a center. He's playing backup center for a few games.
December. I think he's averaging, 14 minutes, 6 points, a rebound, an assist, shooting well, all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying it's great, but you don't want the low bar that we had before.
They need Chumo KK in that spot.
Playable, so it's wild.
When he's not playing backup center, he's playable.
And it goes back to the point, though. It's like, what is this front office doing, right? What are they prioritizing? These guys, I think Kevon and Admiral are both 25, 26, 24. They're in their mid-20s. It's not like these are young prospects, right? That have a chance to have a significantly higher ceiling than what they currently have now. Why hold on to Admiral? I don't when clearly the need was a center, and there was a center in the Lakeland Magic team that could have jumped up and probably helped out a little bit. Anyways, I don't want to go down that role because we've been talking, this podcast is coming up on 50 minutes. I want to look ahead because, we're coming off 3 wins, which is really exciting, really positive. We're kind of wrapping up this last little bit of a pretty significant hard stretch. And then the schedule lightens up a little bit. So the next handful of games, we have Atlanta, Boston, Atlanta, and then it starts to ease up. Atlanta's like, I don't know. They're not as scary as they were a couple of weeks ago because they've had some issues. DeJounte Murray's out, who's obviously like their second best player.
Yeah. Bogdan's killing it, but beyond.
Yeah, that's true.
Trae Young missed. We're recording this on Monday night. Trae Young missed tonight's game. They lost by 30 to Memphis. Like they got some issues, and they got the issues off the court too that they're dealing with.
Yeah, they have some things going on, but they're still a tough team regardless. So we have Atlanta twice. We have Boston. Baseball series together, and then after that, the schedule eases up a little bit. Rockets, Spurs, Lakers, Pistons, Wizards. So just looking at the schedule ahead, what are a couple of games that you have your eye on that one, you're either excited to cover or two, you think the Magic could and should get some wins there? We don't have to go like too far deep, but just, a couple that you were particularly excited about.
I'm always interested in seeing how the Magic test against their peers. And so, I want to believe the Magic are above the Rockets and the Pistons. To me, the Pistons have joined the Spurs as the only 2 teams like actually out and out tanking
especially
right now.
With Cade Cunningham being out for the rest of the year now.
So that game against the Rockets is really interesting to me. Obviously, the Magic kind of owe Houston one after that poor performance in Orlando. So that's going to be a big test game for me. Honestly, like I'm really interested in how they deal with the Washington Wizards because
that'll be
that is a team. The standings are what they are right now, but that is a team that's kind of the last team that's kind of in that play-in periphery. That's the if you're doing the bike race, that's the team at the back of the peloton, and the Magic are trying to kind of get out of the tanking group peloton and into that group. But that's a veteran team with Bradley Beal, with Monte Morris, with Kristaps Porzingis, with Kyle Kuzma. They have a lot of really good weapons and a lot of really good veteran players that should be a playoff team. But that's kind of the level Orlando wants to get at. They want to be on Washington's level. And we obviously haven't seen Washington yet this season. They've had their ups and downs all year. That to me is a game where the Magic can really kind of prove to themselves like, hey, we can compete with some of these more veteran teams. We can compete regularly, every day with these groups of teams. And like to me, like it's easy to get up for the Suns, the Mavericks. It's easy to get up for some of those teams. The Wizards are a good team that can really burn you if you're not focused. So you need to give them the attention they deserve. And young teams don't always give those teams that attention. They struggle with the Rockets. They lost to the Pistons early in the season. They lost to the Thunder the way they lost to the Thunder. Not that those are, obviously the Pistons are a different team back then with Caden in his first game of the season, which is a coin flip anyway. But you got to have the attention to detail against all the teams. Like the Magic owed Toronto one. To me, it was more impressive they won the second game than they won the first game because there's reason to be attentive that first game. The way they played against Milwaukee, you expect them to play that way against Milwaukee. Milwaukee's a team that gets your attention. Washington has good players, but they're not a team that really grabs your attention. But those are the kind of games you have to learn how to win, and you have to be able to win if you're going to take the kind of leap that the Magic fans want this team to take and that the Magic ultimately want to take.
Yeah, that's very true. Very true. Well, Philip, I'm going to wrap up this conversation. I agree with you that the Wizards are a good benchmark team to go and like let's see how they do because like you said, young teams do kind of play up and down to their peers, and the Magic have a long history of doing that in the last couple of years. That was a fantastic answer. Another game, I'm just going to throw this out there because there's some underlying excitement there. I'm really looking forward to Friday, December 23rd versus San Antonio Spurs because I'm going to be in town. going to the game, not covering it as media, just going to go as a fan with a group of friends, Malik, Jonathan, Pat, all people that you guys have all heard on the show before. Philip, it'd be great to see you out there. For the listeners of the show, we're probably going to be doing a fan like hangout before, like pregame at Harry Buffalo's. I'll do like an official time and location, but it's really realistically going to be like 5:30 meet up around Harry Buffalo's, hang out, and then we'll walk over to the arena together. So if you wanna join us, stay tuned to the Twitter page and the next podcast when we'll do like an official announcement. Philip, would love to see you there too. Malik, I really appreciate you joining us this week. It's great to have you back on the show. Philip, likewise as well. Before we wrap this up, Philip, I'd imagine all the listeners of my show should know who you are, but if not, please go ahead and let them know where they can find you and your work.
Yeah, you can find all my work at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You can follow the site there on Twitter at OMagicDaily. You can subscribe to my podcast, Locked On Magic. It is a 5-day-a-week podcast. I have been doing weekend episodes after games as well. So always up to date. Usually usually I'm releasing in the morning these days because I am trying to pretend like I get enough sleep as well. But you can follow that, download and subscribe to Locked On Magic wherever you download podcasts, as well as on YouTube. And you can follow me personally on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. That's Philip with 1L RR_OMD.
Malik, thank you so much again. Philip, you as well. Looking forward to seeing you all in person, hopefully in the next week and a half. And listeners, viewers of the show, we really appreciate you tuning in. Let's go Magic. Peace.